April 18, 1945. Philippine Sea, some 240 miles east of Okinawa. Imagine the morning sky, low clouds scudding like spilled smoke across the horizon, and through them, a lone Zero, slicing through the air with the wounded elegance of a falcon. Its cowling smoked, one wing quivering with every gust, straining against the forces of nature. Inside the tight cockpit, Ensign Tadayoshi Koga, only 20 years old, felt the metallic tang of blood on his tongue, salt stinging his lips from the sea spray. The engine coughed, once, twice, and each sputter thumped in rhythm with his racing heart. He had no inkling, not yet, that in under 4 minutes he would touch down alive on the deck of an American aircraft carrier. And astonishingly, no one on that deck would fire a single shot, because nothing about this moment made sense. This was history being written in the sky. A Japanese pilot, desperately fleeing for his life, an American carrier crew bracing for a kamikaze strike, and a landing so implausible it would echo in war memoirs for decades. But at that instant, Koga's world had shrunk to one imperative: keep the dying Zero aloft long enough to find anywhere to put it down. His day had begun 3 hours earlier at an airfield on Formosa, a routine patrol over the approaches to Okinawa. But nothing had been routine since the American juggernaut began its relentless march across the Pacific. Every sortie felt like the roll of a loaded dice. This morning, fortune had dealt him the American hand. Dear friends, if this video has reached you, it's not by chance. Right now, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Write a number from 1 to 5 in the comments. I will personally respond to the first 50 comments, and make sure to watch the video until the end. Hellcats struck from the sun, diving like angry spirits. Koga's wingman was gone in a flash of fire, a blossom of smoke against the blue. Bullets shredded his fuselage. The engine screamed its agony, and he dove into a cloud bank, desperate to shake his pursuers. Then came the horror. He had no bearings, fuel running low, engine sputtering, radio dead. The islands were lost in the haze, and then, as he peered down, hope and terror collided. There, rising from the ocean like a steel leviathan, was a ship. No, an enormous aircraft carrier. His pulse thundered. A fleeting prayer for a friendly deck flickered and died. The flight deck markings were American. The aircraft parked there were unmistakably U.S. Navy. The realization struck him like a hammer. If he turned away, the sea would claim him within minutes. If he stayed, they would shoot him out of the sky. It was a cruel wartime equation. No right answer, only survival against impossible odds. Koga adjusted his approach. He had nowhere else to go. Below, on the deck of the USS Bogue, the crew was preparing for routine landings when a lookout's shout cut through the morning calm. "Incoming aircraft! Zero! Low! Damaged!" Alarm screamed. Sailors froze. Gunners swung barrels skyward. But then, something inexplicable happened. The Zero wasn't diving. It wasn't accelerating. It wasn't armed. Its landing gear was down. It was trying to land. Murmurs rippled across the deck as officers scrambled. Commander Harold Dixon, Air Operations Chief, lifted his binoculars, disbelief etching his face. "What in God's name?" he muttered. A kamikaze would never lower landing gear. A fighter intent on strafing wouldn't come in so slowly. A reconnaissance plane would never approach a carrier like this. Everything defied reason. "Hold fire! Hold fire!" Dixon barked again, the command slicing through the panic. Koga had no idea this order would save him. All he saw was the deck rising to meet him. The LSO, paddles trembling in hand, froze, unsure how to guide a Zero like an American fighter. The Japanese plane descended through turbulent gusts. Koga's fingers clenched the stick, eyes locked on the wooden deck 50 feet below. 30, 20. The Zero wobbled. Smoke spat from the cowling. The arresting wires shimmered. Koga eased back on the throttle. And then silence. The engine died. The nose pitched forward. The deck surged upward. Sailors flinched. "Brace!" someone shouted. The Zero slammed onto the deck with a deafening metallic crack, bouncing, sliding, tailhooks scraping across 3 wires before jerking violently to a halt on the 4th. Silence fell, profound and stunned. Ensign Tadayoshi Koga sat trembling, alive against all odds. The sailors stared, jaws slack, trying to reconcile what they had witnessed. A Japanese pilot landed on an American aircraft carrier. Slowly, Koga raised his hands. Rifles lifted, but no shots fired, no chaos, just the surreal, breathless realization of the impossible. Commander Dixon approached, and, later immortalized in countless memoirs, spoke the words that grounded history. "Secure the pilot. He's ours." Koga swallowed, unsure of what awaited him, but knowing one thing for certain. His war in the skies was over. The crew advanced cautiously, weapons raised yet fingers off triggers. Never before had an American captured a Japanese pilot like this. Not from the air, not from a plane still warm from flight, certainly not from the deck of a carrier he had nearly crashed into. The cockpit canopy creaked as Koga pushed it open. His hand shook, oil smeared across his face, a cut above his eyebrow, bleeding into the grime. Wind whipped over the deck, drying sweat and fear alike. A young sailor, barely older than Koga himself, gaped. "Jesus, he's just a kid," he muttered. Koga understood the word. He had studied fragments of English in school, enough to grasp the meaning. He knew the truth. Resistance now would mean death within seconds. Commander Dixon's boots thumped across the wooden deck. He stopped, studied Koga for a long heartbeat, then spoke, calm and firm. "You will be treated fairly. No sudden moves. Understand?" Koga nodded. 2 sailors gently helped him from the cockpit. His legs buckled under him, weakness revealed at last. They caught him instinctively. In that fleeting moment, the human cost of war crystallized. Once a feared enemy pilot, he was now just a man. Wounded, terrified, exhausted. As they led him toward the island, Koga's eyes roamed over the deck. Grumman Wildcats, Avenger bombers, crewmen moving with precision and purpose. Hoses rolled, chocks dragged, aircraft guided into place. He could not suppress a flicker of awe. This was not the chaotic, under-resourced fields he had known. This was a floating city, efficient, ordered, alive. Lethal precision, near-perfect engineering. No wonder the United States never found itself short of aircraft. Imagine, for a moment, the scene. Lieutenant Koga, battered and exhausted, being led below deck, while above, the flight crews gather around the captured Zero. Fingers trace the aircraft's skin, marveling at its fragility. It feels almost like a soda can. Thin, light, unarmored. Others crane over the cockpit. No armor plating. And the fuel lines right there in the open? One mutters in disbelief. Everything's so damn light. A mechanic whistles through his teeth, eyes wide. No wonder it turns like a demon. This is a death trap with wings. Yet to the men of the U.S. Navy and their intelligence officers, it is no death trap. It is a prize, a treasure plucked from the Pacific intact. A combat-flown A6M Zero, the very fighter that had haunted American pilots' nightmares since Pearl Harbor, the aircraft that ruled the skies in the early days of the war. And now, without a single shot, fired it sits quietly on their deck. The intelligence officers descend almost instantly, circling their new prize like hunters around a freshly fallen quarry. Below deck, Koga is ushered into a cramped compartment. 2 MPs stand silently by the door. He lowers himself onto a metal bench, hands clenched together, as if trying to hold himself in one piece. He expects pain, interrogation, perhaps brutal punishment. Japan had drilled into its pilots that Americans were merciless monsters. Instead, a medic steps forward. "Hold still," he says softly, dabbing at the cut on Koga's brow with antiseptic. The sting makes him flinch, but there is no shouting, no strike, only calm professionalism. When the task is done, the medic offers a small cup of water. Koga regards it with suspicion. The medic nods. "Go ahead." He drinks, tasting cold, pure water, the best he has had in months. The medic smiles faintly. "You'll be all right." And then he leaves. Koga exhales slowly. Every lesson, every officer, every pamphlet in his life had painted Americans as monsters. Yet the first man he meets has treated him as a human being. The contradiction gnaws at him more fiercely than the crash itself. News of the Zero's capture spreads through the carrier like wildfire. Within minutes, a dozen officers swarm around the aircraft. Camera crews snap relentlessly. Chief Engineer Addison practically climbs beneath the fuselage to inspect the engine mounts. "Look at the weight savings," he mutters. "Everything is minimal. They sacrificed protection for maneuverability." Commander Dixon, standing beside him, raises an eyebrow. "Can we put her back in the air?" Addison grins. "Oh, we're damn sure going to try." Meanwhile, Captain Giles exchanges a knowing look with the air intelligence officer. "This goes straight to Washington," he declares. "We need a transport ready as soon as we reach port." A captured Zero promises simulations, tests, tactical insights, a potential revolution in air combat strategy. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of American lives could be saved because one young Japanese pilot misjudged his heading and trusted the wrong patch of ocean. In his compartment, Koga feels the vibrations of the flight deck, aircraft taking off and landing above. He imagines the Zero being examined, prodded, dissected. He wonders what his commanders would think, whether his family will ever know he survived, or if Japan will simply erase him from memory. He bows his head. He has failed his mission, failed his homeland, and now the pride of Japan rests in enemy hands. The shame presses down like a vice, but he is alive. And in war, survival is itself a quiet rebellion. On deck, Commander Dixon shakes his head in disbelief. "Gentlemen," he murmurs, "this may be the most valuable landing of the entire war." The deck crew nods in solemn agreement. Night settles over the USS Bogue, a heavy blanket over the calm Black Sea. Below deck, Ensign Tadayoshi Koga sits on the edge of his bunk, fingers interlaced until they ache. The vibrations of the deck still hum through him, the weight of the war machine above him, never more palpable. Captured. Alive. Dishonored. The words repeat endlessly in his mind. A metallic click interrupts his thoughts. 2 Marines enter, neither harsh nor aggressive, only professional. "Pilot," one says, "you're needed topside." Koga rises, legs stiff, shoulders heavy. He braces for interrogation, perhaps punishment. But the Marines guide him through narrow corridors, with the same calm efficiency as the medic before. The carrier is alive around him. Shouts, the hum of machinery, sailors moving with purpose. Nothing like the crumbling, fuel-starved airfields of Japan. At last, he enters a small briefing room where Commander Dixon, Captain Giles, and a Japanese-speaking officer await. The atmosphere is almost surreal, quiet, respectful, patient. "Ensign Koga," the translator begins gently. "We have questions, not about secrets, but about your condition and the events of the morning." Koga's gaze drops. His voice is low, strained. "I have failed. Capture brings shame. The translator relays the words. Dixon exhales softly. Son, he says, you chose to live. That isn't shame. That's survival. Koga looks up, startled by the absence of mockery, of anger, just humanity. Captain Giles leans forward. You'll be treated fairly. Fed, protected. And when the war ends, you go home. Home? The word cuts deep. Would Japan even take him back? Or would they erase his existence entirely? He gives no answer. The questioning is brief. No threats, no demands, just simple inquiries. When it ends, he is escorted back to his compartment, unbound, unharmed, yet more disoriented than ever. The next morning, a new kind of chaos reigns on the flight deck. Engineers swarm the Zero. Addison wipes his hands on a rag. All right, boys. Today we find out what makes this thing dance. Panels are removed, photos taken, measurements logged. Every rivet, every cable, every inch of Japanese engineering is scrutinized with feverish enthusiasm. One crewman taps the wing. Feels like paper. Another whistles at the carburetor. No wonder it climbs like a rocket. Addison grins. We're going to crack this thing open like a Christmas present. The Zero has ceased to be merely an airplane. It is intelligence gold. A lieutenant leans toward Commander Dixon, eyes gleaming. Sir, this changes everything. Dixon's nod was measured, but the truth was clear. It already had. Below deck, Ensign Koga felt the vibrations of heavy boots above him, the clanging echoes of metal being moved. Every tap, every reverberation, every metallic sigh told him the Zero was being dismantled, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, its secrets laid bare. Duty whispered that he should feel shame, that he had failed, but the steady thrum in his chest spoke a different truth. He was alive. Against all odds, he was still here. Outside, the morning sun glinted sharply off the Philippine Sea, spilling brilliance across the carrier's deck, as if nothing unusual had ever happened. But every sailor aboard the Bogue knew otherwise. The captured Zero had become a legend overnight. Crews jostled for a glimpse, cameras clicked for photographs, engineers murmured in hushed excitement over its design, dissecting its light frame, marveling at its climb, noting every vulnerability. Ensign Koga sat quietly in his small compartment, the hum of activity above him seeping through the bulkheads. He imagined the stripped aircraft on the deck, panels laid out like armor discarded by a fallen warrior. He could almost hear the engineer's conversation, its strengths, its weaknesses, the secrets of a plane that had dominated the skies over the Pacific. He pressed his palm to the cold metal wall. It felt like touching a tombstone. The door creaked, and one man entered, the Japanese-speaking officer who had translated for the captain. Ensign Koga, he said politely. May I sit? Koga nodded, and the man lowered himself onto the bunk beside him. I know this must feel confusing, the officer began carefully. You were taught that surrender is shameful, that death is preferable to capture. Koga looked down, unwilling to hear the truth. But yesterday, the officer continued softly, you saw something different. Koga swallowed, words failing him. I do not understand your kindness, he murmured. It is not kindness, the officer replied. It is humanity. War or no war, you are a pilot. You are a man. Men deserve dignity. Koga blinked rapidly, a sting of unexpected emotion in his eyes. The translator rested his hands on his knees and spoke again, steady and calm. I will not try to change your beliefs. But understand this. You are not dishonored. You are alive. And one day, you will return home. Koga hesitated. His voice was small, cracked. What if home no longer wants me? The officer looked at him with a quiet sympathy that Koga had never expected from an enemy. Then, you build a new one. Meanwhile, on the flight deck, Commander Dixon and Lieutenant Addison watched as the Zero was carefully lowered into the hangar bay. It would soon be transported to the United States for detailed testing. Long before American pilots faced another Zero in combat, engineers would know every blind spot, every limitation, every flaw. Addison exhaled, almost in disbelief. "Sir, this single airplane may save hundreds of lives." Dixon nodded slowly, eyes drifting to the endless blue horizon. Fate had a way of twisting war in ways no one could foresee. And here, the courage of a single young pilot had altered the course of conflict in ways neither side could have predicted. That afternoon, Koga was moved to quarters meant for long-term prisoners of war. The room was modest but comfortable. A real bed, a small desk, and a narrow window letting in warm sunlight from the sea. On the table sat a tray of food rice, chicken, bread, water. Americans fed their prisoners well, and Koga, exhausted and famished, began to eat quietly, mechanically at first. With every bite, hunger loosened the knot of tension in his chest. He was alive. He was safe. And somehow, against all he had been taught, his captors treated him not as a disgrace, but as a human being. He set down his fork and looked at the photograph taped to the wall opposite his bed. A picture of the captured Zero, taken on deck before it was lowered into the hangar. His aircraft was gone. His mission had ended. His fate now belonged to history. But Tadayoshi Koga, just a young man caught in a war far too vast for comprehension, was still breathing. And that single stubborn breath had, in its own quiet way, changed the Pacific War forever.